Well, thank you, SMF, for this opportunity for us to share on our topic, and also ladies and gentlemen in the audience for staying for this session as well. Understand this is a lunchtime, so everyone must be quite hungry. So I'll try my best to make it meaningful, insightful, as much as possible. So before I go specifically into the topic of sustainability trend, I would first like to share the meaning of our company name ASUENE, in case you're wondering how to pronounce that also. So asu in Japanese means tomorrow. It is also a Japanese pronunciation of earth, which is said as asu. And ene being the short form of energy, what ASUENE is envisioned to do is to achieve sustainable earth for tomorrow's generation. And with that mission in mind, what we are offering is a one-stop solution for decarbonization that consists of our technology platform that helps companies to measure carbon emissions across scope 1, 2, 3, as well as at a product level, and for us to become an active participant and a partner to also come up with your decarbonization strategies. So what I'll be sharing in this session is our insights and our point of view in terms of the sustainability trend and why it is important to embark on a journey of sustainability today. So I would first like to start off with this business mindset. So in any businesses, in order to be successful, there are three critical components, which is to come up with a strategy and a forecast simulation that is all short, medium, and long term. And sustainability essentially is built on a similar concept. Whereas environmental sustainability, the climate risk, we understand the future implications if you don't take anything today. So that's why we need to take this long-term impact on our business today and to assess from a financial point of view and how this is going to impact our short-term, medium-term, long-term operations and what are the things that we must act on today. So first sharing on the original concept of why sustainability started in the first place. So it is not about the altruism where everyone's coming together saying, let's do better for the world. That is, of course, a very, very important element of it. But at the end of the day, it is very much driven by the future impact, the long-term impact. So it is quite evident that in the past, carbon emissions has been on the rise. And together with that, the temperature has been increasing. And as a result of that, there are many, many financial implications as well. For example, the scarcity of food or energy is going to inflate the cost. So if you don't optimize your operation today, then you're going to be bearing a higher cost as you continue your operations. Now, following this trend, there has been many advancements in terms of the sustainability reporting requirements. So maybe some of you might have heard of a couple of these key terms before. It is also called a ESG alphabet soup that's also causing a lot of fatigue in the industry as well. But the good news is that in the past 25 years, all the different associations, different countries, different markets have been coming together to come up with more of a standardized method of looking at sustainability. So in the Singapore context, you might be hearing more of the term called ISSB, which is going to be the main and the basis of a climate reporting that is going to be effective from 1st of January 2025, which already is in place today in Singapore. So the idea behind ISSB is that it's developed by IFRS, which you all know is the one behind the financial accounting standards. So the idea behind ISSB is to say, let's look at climate reporting the same manner as we look at our climate reporting, which means how you manage your data, how you come up with your strategies, and how the climate impact affects your business financial performances are going to become a key and a critical factor in how the businesses should be looking at your sustainability performance. So following all of these global trends, things are starting to change in terms of the motivations and the reason why companies are looking at sustainability. It used to be the problem of the companies in a dotted box, which would be the listcos who need to do mandatory reporting to the stock exchange, or it might be MNCs. Maybe they are complying to the regulations in the EU as well as the US. Or it could be the carbon-heavy energy companies. Maybe they are being taxed on their operation because of the heavy emissions. However, I think also connecting with the previous topic that was shared by the gentleman from IBM is that supply chain is becoming a key word. where all of the companies in a dotted box are now starting to have a target that are connected with your supply chain, coming out with a supply chain procurement policy, or making an influence as a catalyst in the industry to influence even the SMEs to also embark on a decarbonization journey. So some examples, we can see the global leaders such as Toyota, Apple, Amazon has also announced this about 2 months ago to set a supply chain-based targets. So the companies that are working with enterprise companies that have committed to a certain target in terms of the decarbonization to also follow the similar path in terms of tracking the carbon emission, taking care of the environment in, coming through its operations, and also contributing to the decarbonization as a holistic ecosystem of the supply chain. So in that case, what is happening in Singapore? We've seen that globally, there has been a lot of advancement. We are starting to see more and more news articles in Singapore, positive news also, in terms of some of the decarbonization achievement, as well as the upcoming regulations, as well as the upcoming incentives for companies to embark on this. Singapore, as we all know, has a target to achieve net zero by 2050. And to accelerate that process, also have a short-term or the mid-term target that is coming from Green Plan 2030. So in the past, Singapore has been making quite an impressive progress as well. So the chart that you see on the top left is a chart that comes from 2022. And then what you see on the bottom right is a chart that comes from last year. So the Global Climate Active Tracker will analyze the carbon emissions at a national level, as well as the policies and the regulations in place. And Singapore used to be put under the criteria called critically insufficient, meaning there were a lot of improvements that needed to be put into place in order to maintain or mitigate that temperature increase to a 2 degrees level. However, in the past couple of years, Singapore has been putting a lot of support as well as the regulation to encourage companies to decarbonize, and therefore has come down to the level of highly insufficient. Now, if you hear highly insufficient, it might sound like it's still inefficient, but if we look at a lot of the global countries, they are still at a critically insufficient. So making this progress is actually a very, very good news. So if we deep dive into more of a specific requirement of what's happening in Singapore, as we know last year, Singapore government has started tracking Scope 3, meaning that all of the government tender projects will also start to pay attention to whether the companies that they're working with is embarking on a similar journey. Carbon tax is being on the rise. It used to be $5 per ton last year. It is predicted to increase to $50 to $80 by 2030. Now, today, carbon tax is not something that is subjected to every companies operating in Singapore because there's a threshold, which is 25,000 tons of Scope 2. And there are not many companies in Singapore that have to pay carbon tax. But those companies that are subjected to carbon tax tend to be more of the power generators, electricity providers. So not only the companies, but for us living an everyday life, using aircon at home, we are indirectly also bearing the cost of carbon tax because the energy companies will have to mitigate the increase in operational costs arising from carbon tax in a form of the charge fee of the service. So this is kind of a way that Singapore is encouraging everybody to pay attention to your energy consumptions, even if the carbon tax is not directly impacting your operation. So outside of all of these financial and Singapore at a macro environment level, SGX listed companies will have to do a mandatory reporting based on the ISSB starting from this financial year. It's also going to expand into a supply chain emission, which is a Scope 3, starting from next financial year. And Scope 1 and 2 is going to require limited assurance. So what I shared earlier in terms of ISSB or the IFRS coming up with a new reporting requirement, looking at climate reporting in a similar manner as a financial reporting, the companies that are doing the disclosure will also have to do auditing for the climate reporting as well. And eventually the non-listed companies will be subjected to the reporting as well. So following all of these regulation trends, more and more Singapore companies are doing a disclosure. So if you look at the list scores specifically, versus 2022 to 2023, there's an increase of more than 10%, 30% disclosing some sort of a climate disclosure. And also, there's been an increasing amount of resources available as well. So today, of course, SMF, there was a sharing of a CSO as a service as well. And other than that, the likes of Enterprise Singapore, as well as the likes of IMDA, is providing a lot of support to encourage companies to get started on this decarbonization journey. So it is going to be one of the years where you have abundance of the support to really kickstart your journey. And since this is an SMF event, I thought we would deep dive into what's the impact of the manufacturing to Singapore's national emission. The statistics show that 65.1% of emissions actually come from the manufacturing sectors or the industrial sectors within Singapore. So in terms of the primary emissions, it's 49%, close to half of it. In terms of the secondary emissions, which will be the manufacturers using the electricity or the power, it contributes to 16%. So combined represents about 2/3, meaning the manufacturers operating in Singapore have a room to contribute to reduction of Singapore and ultimately to achieve the national goal of net zero 2050. So now, following all of these regulations, we understand some companies have had a head start to start on the journey. But why are some of the companies doing a carbon footprinting? What are the true motivations? We typically look at this from a defense and an offense point of view. Defense being a compliance-driven, which is essentially to do something today so that you don't have to spend your costs in the future, to future-proof, which is the topic of this conversation. So essentially to be ready with all of the mandatory reporting, sharing these reports with your supply chain partners, making sure that whenever your clients come up with a new regulation on a procurement, you're ready to comply so that they don't switch to another companies. And on the other hand, because of all of these global movements, there are a lot of opportunities that are being built as well. So one of the obvious ones would be the competitive advantage, which can of course come from the consumers. There's a statistic showing that the consumers are willing to pay a bit of a premium for more sustainable products. Gen Z specifically tend to have more tendency to support sustainable brands. Also in a B2B, because some of the companies that you work with might be under some sort of a regulation or the pressure, so being ready to measure your carbon footprint, share your report, might protect you, as well as to maybe build competitive advantage from a B2B point of view as well. And of course, quantifying the impact is always great because when you show the impact with numbers, you can share with your employees, reward employees who's working on a project, as well as to share and report to your supply chain partners who might value that contribution as well. And ultimately, operational efficiency. So financial point of view in sustainability is critical. If you optimize or if you do your carbon reporting, have the granular details of your emissions as well as your energy consumptions, you can come up with a strategy to reduce or optimize your energy consumption. So even if your energy costs increase due to inflation, you might still be able to generate some sort of a savings. So I might kind of skip this one in spirit of the time. In terms of the carbon reporting, we hear carbon reporting from usually the one on the right, which is a corporate emission, usually referred to as a scope 1, 2, 3. This is a concept of measuring your carbon emission of your business operation arising from a one financial year period, and that you make a comparison, much like your financial report, to compare your P&L this year versus a previous financial year. So in this case, your carbon emission of a business operation is kind of a health checker for your climate performance for a one financial year point of view. So the purpose of doing this is really to report, whether it be by request, mandatory requirements, or simply to have a view of your performance. Now, what is also coming up and what is relevant to the manufacturing industries is a concept called CFP, which stands for the carbon footprint of your product, also in the parts of Europe, also called PCF, the product carbon footprint. The concept here is instead of at a company level, you measure your emission at a product or service level, where you divide it into a different life cycle stages to say what are the raw materials that come into it, how did you transport it, where did it come from, what happens at a manufacturing process, how do you deliver it out to your customers, how many years is it going to be used, how is it going to be disposed, and then putting the numbers into every single process here to derive saying that this particular product equals how much CO2. The purpose of doing this is to quantify the impact of whatever efforts that you've made along any part of your process of the supply chain, and also to share these figures with your buyers as well as your consumers. Now, in doing the carbon reporting, we emphasize the importance of data granularity, or having a technology that will enable you to understand as much as possible in terms of where your carbon emissions are coming from specifically. So I wanted to put this in a very relatable example, which is a weight loss. Scenario A, I'm sure we all have experienced this or know someone doing it. If you want to lose weight, the first thing you do is you just stop eating. That will be scenario A. That will be same as straight away jumping into installing a solar panel without quantifying your impact and not being able to understand what the contributions of these decarbonization efforts are, as well as to come up with the next strategy. Scenario B will be those who simply take the measurement of your weight and then try to come up with a plan, monitor the progress, so at least you know you can track how much you've lost. That will be similar to a limited level of the measurement of your carbon emissions. You do your annual analysis of how you perform. Maybe you lump sum your activities into one in terms of the analysis. And the scenario C is when you measure not only your weight, but maybe you also measure your body fat percentages, start tracking your calories, your protein, carbs, fiber intake, and then you come up with a strategies based on data. You monitor and you adjust as you go. So this will be similar to having more specialized tracking tool for your carbon emissions or any environmental tools, so that you have better granularity, understanding the visibility of which particular business site, which particular operations, which particular production process is contributing to the reduction, and what kind of initiative is bringing the most amount of result, and therefore that you'll be able to come up with a better strategy in achieving that result. So on that concept, carbon footprinting of the product, CFP, is considered one of the best solutions in order for you to have a better visibility of your product manufacturing. So the example here is to divide a car into the life cycle stages, mining material all the way to how that's going to end up in a landfill. So usually when we talk about the product carbon footprint, we might come with understanding that this product equals how much CO2, and it's all about the procurement decision makings. But by breaking it down into a different process, you would actually be able to see the contribution of every single efforts, which might be coming from how you source your material, or maybe how you source your logistics companies, or where the renewable energy is being used. And then putting all of these together, you'll be able to see the contribution of each process. Now, by doing this, also another advantage is that you'll be able to do a scenario analysis of comparing a conventional product versus how you came up with your sustainable products and what the reductions are. And the significance of this is that sometimes within the product's life cycle, you might have larger emissions coming from somewhere. For example, maybe you're using a raw material as a result of using a sustainable material. However, in its lifetime, if it's contributing to the energy efficiency, then there might be a savings or the deduction of lifetime emissions, which might be very, very important for the companies that are engaging in such activities to communicate to the consumers and the customers as well. So the CFP concept, although it's called a carbon footprint of product, it can actually be applied to services, events as well. It is essentially just to break down your emission into different processes. So one particular use case could also be applied to logistics and transport, where we have helped them to measure the impact of switching a very, very long distance truck delivery into using a railway. And the surprising result was that it contributed to 90% savings just by switching one of the processes. And in order to come up with this kind of strategy, the most important thing was, of course, to break it down into different processes first. So now, just to end it off, in terms of this topic, if any of these conversations of the carbon emissions, whether it be for your company operation or whether it be for your product level, our company, ASUENE, we're here to support. We also have a booth set up right over there, C1, near the entrance. So just a little bit in terms of the ASUENE. Again, we are a one-stop solution that provides the platform that enables you to measure your emissions as accurately, efficiently as possible. We provide quite a comprehensive support for you to understand how to use the tool, how to analyze emissions, as well as to also recommend the decarbonization strategies. We are supporting more than 10,000 plus companies with their decarbonization journey, and also our hybrid model helps you to get started as well as to maintain sustainability practices, and there are many, many resources available today as well. So that is exactly the 20-minute presentation that I'm sharing. Thank you for listening again, and I wish you have a wonderful Chinese New Year season ahead. Thank you.